Well, the president's got it just all wrong. First, we created tariffs. Farmers are taking it on the chin with higher costs, just like everybody listening to this, viewing this. Then he starts a trade war with China, and soybean farmers are taking it on the chin. China was the largest purchaser of U.S. soybeans, and literally overnight they stopped buying soybeans, leaving bins full and farmers going bankrupt. And now, because he likes the president of Argentina, or at least that was the basis that he gave, he's going to not only he gave them $40 billion. As a matter of fact, the first $20 billion went out, and the first thing Argentina did was lower a tax and sell soybeans to China. And now he turns around and says, I'm going to buy their beef. So it's really, many of the ranchers, we have folks on our staff and in our network, farmers that raise cattle, and, it's a betrayal. They had expected the prices have been going up. They're finally making some money after about a decade of losses. Our cattle herd is the smallest it's been since the 50s, and they're finally now have a chance to recover and put more heifers in to be breeding stock for cows. And the president says, "Oh, beef's too high at the grocery store, so I'm going to import more beef." He's just got it wrong. It won't work. There's no guarantee. The big packers, 4 companies, control 80% of all the beef in this country. So you go to the grocery store, it's an illusion that there's that much choice in that case. 4 companies control the beef in this country, and there's nothing the president's doing that they'll be the buyers. They'll get cheaper meat, and nothing guarantees the consumer will see a lower price. As a matter of fact, they've been making record profits during this time of high beef prices. They could stand to lower some of that, continue to pay the farmer what they need, the rancher, and provide the consumer with a fair market price in the grocery store. He's just got it wrong.
Soybean farmers, you are about to be treated like a fool by the Republican Party and Fox News and some of the mouthpieces. You're about to get flooded with all this information about how Trump just struck this massive deal for 25 million metric tons a year for 3 years with China of soybeans, right? Trump saved you. The Republican Party just saved you, right? Saved your farm. You were getting 27 million metric tons. You were selling 27 million metric tons last year under Biden. He made a deal for less. And that doesn't even take into account the 6 months from May to October where there was nothing. You were getting paid nothing. The American Soybean Association estimates that soybean farmers lost an estimated $10 billion in those 6 months. $10 billion. 6 months of worry and fear and how am I going to make payments and what is going on by soybean farmers. And now Trump and the Republican Party are going to swoop in and say, like, look, we just saved you. They're the motherfuckers who took it away in the first place with this tariff war. They're the ones who made your life shitty and made you live in fear. Now they're going to give it back to you and expect you to cheer them and be like, thank you so much. I can't believe you saved us. They're the fuckers who did it to you. Right? It's like a fucking robber coming up to you and stealing $27 and giving you 25 back and saying, are you going to thank me? Like, what the actual fuck? So watch this. Watch. It's going to be all over Fox. They're going to say, like, look at this historic deal. Incredible for farmers. I can't believe what he did for farmers. It's less than what you were getting. And you lost $10 billion in the process. Just think it through. They fucked you over. $10 billion. And now they're giving you less than what you were getting. I would not be happy.
This president sold America's farmers out. And, farmers called every day and they said that they feel like they've been betrayed by this president, $40 billion to Argentina. And then they start to sell soybeans to China. And then the president comes and invites them here to the United States and then cuts another deal undermining beef cattle farmers here at home. So he always says he's putting America's first, that he loves farmers, but this doesn't look American at all.
I think it's 25 million tons, but it's numbers that they've never seen before in terms of soybeans, in terms of other things.
Trump, you little lying rat. Check the numbers from 2024. 27 million tons sold. So what the hell are you talking about, buddy?
The analysis from the American Farm Bureau Federation, they are worried. Commodity prices are falling for U.S. corn and soybeans, down 30% in 12 in just 1 year, but exports have not risen. You would expect that falling prices would stimulate global demand, but not this time. China is buying more from Brazil, and so U.S. farmers are sending their surpluses to Mexico, which is the top export destination for the first time ever. Earlier this year, China set off alarm bells when they canceled huge wheat orders from the U.S. and from Australia. We did a piece on it here and said that this was just the start of things to come. China canceled 240,000 tons of U.S. soft red, then came back the following Friday, canceled 264,000 tons. China called up Australia and canceled 1 million tons from there. The cancellation was the biggest ever, and Bloomberg tells us the obvious, that China found cheaper wheat from somewhere else. Ben Buckner is a chief grains analyst for a company in Chicago. Chicago is where our biggest agricultural exchanges are. We spend a lot of money for Bloomberg to tell us what's going on, but they don't know either, where China bought 1.5 million tons of wheat to replace their canceled buys from the US and from Australia. They don't know, and so neither do the farmers who rely on Chicago grains analysts or on Bloomberg to tell them what's going on. I mean here that the farmers in the United States and Australia planted 1.5 million tons of wheat, and then China canceled them. But nobody knows who filled that demand. Was it more productive farms in China? Was it Russia? Was it Brazil, outside of our trading systems? Our people don't know. And it wasn't just wheat. Corn inventories were up 13%, soybeans by 9%, behind wheat, which was at 16%. These increases, millions and millions of tons of farm product, and the buyers are gone, and nobody knows why. Here are the prices paid for Chinese corn and wheat, hitting multi-year lows. So they are getting their demand filled from somewhere. We just don't know where. We look back now and have learned that the demand was met by a combination of all three, actually. China had a near record harvest. Russia and Brazil stepped up their exports, but it was outside our system. We only learned about it later. And it was obviously at lower prices than they were getting from the US and Australia, or they wouldn't have canceled the trades, and we wouldn't see the prices heading lower. Bloomberg is scrambling and trying to figure out things. Here in this one, they noticed that China's imports of both wheat and corn are in a steady decline. When this article was published, the USDA was still forecasting big Chinese imports from the US, but if those imports go down, a big demand driver just disappears. This is one of the biggest stories in the world, and nobody is talking about it and what it means for our companies in a nuts and bolts way, trying to do business in the real world when we don't know what the prices are anymore. The BRICS countries are doing giant volumes of business now, outside of our systems and outside the dollar. This is $1 billion problem for a Chicago bank that makes risk-free profits every year just processing trades. But for tens of thousands of farmers outside Chicago, it's $1 million problem. They planted wheat that there are no buyers for, and they don't know why. But this is why. For 100 years, we've had a system that the world had to use because the technology wasn't there to do it any other way. Now the technology is here. Distributed ledgers, central bank digital currencies, immediate cross-border settlements at zero cost. It's here. The BRICS countries are building a new system and they're almost finished. And that means that our system is almost finished too. This is Dalian, Liaoning. Be good.
Mr. President, Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson, if you are watching this, American lives are not a political game. 42 million Americans, half of them children, will not be able to put food on the table on Saturday in 3 days if you do not release the funds that have already been appropriated to fund the SNAP program. 42 million Americans, and this is a choice that you are making to starve American children, elders, seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, because you think that this is a political game, and we are not here to play. So feed our children. Now I want to address this situation. There is money sitting in a contingency fund, billions of dollars that Congress has already appropriated to ensure that this did not happen to our country. That money is there. That is why 24 attorney generals for the states here in the US are suing right now to make sure that that money gets released, because they are choosing to not release it. Because apparently the White House seems to care more about building ballrooms, bailing out billionaires, billions for Argentina, blowing things up, than they care about feeding our kids, our federal workers, families on the brink, fixing healthcare, and firming up our national security, because literally everything that they are doing right now points to that. And like my colleague, Representative Brown, this is personal. It's not just personal for me because a quarter of New Mexico families receive food assistance as part of how they put food on the table, but because I literally would not be standing here as your congresswoman had it not been for investments in human potential like the food assistance program. Because like many New Mexicans, like many millions and millions of families out there, had we not had that safety net at times when my family struggled, I would not have made it. So I am standing here today as a proud congresswoman because I was able to get by when I needed help. So shame on you, President. Shame on you, Johnson. Shame on you, Mr. Thune. You are choosing to take food off of the table of American families and our children. And it's immoral.
New York State is knowingly allowing solar corporations to lie to our farmers, and I have proof of it. I was tipped off this week to something that sounded impossible to me, or surely something I couldn't prove on the internet. And after doing a little research, it wasn't hard at all to prove that what I was tipped off to is 100% correct and right on the New York Ag and Market website. I was tipped off to the fact that when these solar companies decommission their solar farms, they are allowed to leave everything in the ground that is beyond 4 feet deep. And I thought to myself, surely this isn't printed online admitting that they are doing that. I've heard from so many different landowners around me that they do abandon the materials and the equipment, but I was like, surely this can't be proved. I went right to the New York State Department of Ag and Markets website, and right there at 48 inches, it says all of that may be abandoned in place. I don't even hide it. It's right here. Then I looked up, what are they abandoning in place? And here's the list of what gets left behind in the soil that they are telling farmers will be farmable, will be arable when they're done with their solar farm. Layman's terms, that means metal, copper, aluminum, PVC, plastic, contaminated backfill, you see it all, is going to be left in that soil 4 feet down. These companies are coming to farmers' doorsteps, physically knocking on their door and lying to them. I saw it at the Fort Edward hearing I went to. Farmer after farmer got up there and genuinely believed their land was going to be usable when this is all said and done. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know you probably can't farm land that's contaminated with lead and cadmium 4 feet down below the soil. I looked this up even further. It's actually common knowledge that when a solar farm is done with a piece of land, it is essentially a contaminated industrial field or a brown site. Regular corporations already do that to the land, but my issue is these solar corporations are lying, blatantly lying to these farmers to get them to hand over their land, and the state is in bed with them, allowing them to do it. It's right on their website. They are allowing them to abandon their equipment 4 feet down in our soil. I even looked up for the Fort Edward solar project going in the town over from mine. It's right there in the decommissioning files. And even better, for the residential land in question for Fort Edward Solar, they only have to go 3 feet down to remove what they have and then abandon the rest. They use the word abandon. They are lying to you. They are lying to these farmers. I have a major problem with that, and I fully believe this needs to be tried to the fullest extent of the law. And that is what I'm hoping to do with my nonprofit American Land Rescue Fund. Again, thank you to everyone who has supported this week. We have a long way to go, and with each passing day, what I am uncovering here continues to blow my mind, and I didn't even think that was possible. This corruption is so deep, and I am committed to exposing it here as long as I can.
This is what Trump's homeless plan actually looks like. Utah is building a 1,300-bed camp for homeless people, and advocates are calling it what it actually is: a forced labor camp. It's being built to enforce Trump's new executive order on homelessness, the one that threatens to cut funding from states unless they start criminalizing homeless people sleeping on the streets. The facility will sit on 16 acres of land outside Salt Lake City. State officials are calling it an accountability center. So all the members of the Trump regime are going to be held accountable in there too, or what? Advocates are calling it a prison with a nicer sign. Over 300 of the beds will be for people who will be involuntarily committed, meaning they'll be sent there against their will. Others will be assigned to work-conditioned housing, aka forced labor. Utah officials say it's a transformative way to handle homelessness. But this doesn't sound like help. It sounds like torture and punishment. This forced labor camp is a test run for Trump's national plan to build tent cities on cheap land. And in his words, where homeless people can be rounded up and put to work. The Trump regime is turning poverty into a crime, even though they're the ones responsible for making the poverty happen. So when Trump says he's ending crime and disorder, remember what that really means. He's rounding up poor people that he helped create and throwing them into forced labor camps against their will.
Trump promised us we're going to have China over a barrel. Instead, China's soybean purchases from the United States went to 0.0 several months ago. And moments after this meeting, Scott Bessent took to Fox News, Fox Business, to give us the announcement. Thanks to Donald Trump's courageous and principled leadership, my words, not his, China is now going to start buying some soybeans again, framing it as a major victory.
Maria, one of the big parts of this agreement, and I'm going to break the news here on your story, is the massive amount of agriculture purchases that the Chinese are going to be doing in this agreement. So the Chinese have agreed to buy 12 million metric tons of soybeans during this season, right now, between now and the should be January. And then for the next 3 years, they're going to be buying a minimum of 25 million metric tons per annum for the next 3 years. What I would expect is, as President Trump did in 2020, after President Xi had agreed to the phase 1.
All right, so listen, I hate to break the news to you. China had been buying 27 million tons per year of soybeans, 27 per year. We're supposed to now get down on our knees and pray at the altar of Trump because Trump has fixed the problem he created by getting China to do 12 million this year instead of 27, 25 million next year instead of 27, 25 million the year after that instead of 27, and 25 million the year after that instead of 27.
Well, it's been great this morning watching the congressman complain about how SNAP has been the downfall of America. I'm talking about you, Clay Higgins, you, Eric Burleson, you, Jason Smith. You make $174,000 a year. That's $3,396 a week. But you're blaming the people who got $4,400 in free food this year, when you know damn well most of them work in your district. And the rest of them are children, disabled, and elderly. But you're proud of yourselves. We're going to cut those losers off. When's the last time you paid for anything? You dine out with Mobil. You dine out with Marathon, Exxon, Dow. When's the last time you even paid for a frickin' meal? That's okay. The meals are all on us, aren't they? You don't care. You forget that you know people who have nothing. And especially you, Jason Smith. You have people in your own family who have nothing. There was a time in your life that your mama was on the SNAP. You wouldn't be where you are if it wasn't for the welfare benefits. But you know what? That's what they're for. They are for people to better themselves, which you did. But what you forgot is you drug the rest of them down as you did it. You pull the ladder up behind you. No SNAP for you. No money for you. But you make $174,000 a year. $3,396 a week. How much of that have you dedicated to the food pantries in Salem? You could give 1 week's salary to Grace, and it would feed dozens of people. Have you done that?
The clouds are fat with rain and dumb with indifference, hovering like an exhausted bureaucracy over the backbone of America. Below them, fields of mud, tractors stuck axle deep in a dream gone sour, and farmers staring into the sopping rows like gamblers searching for dice. This was supposed to be a year of bounty. It was supposed to be the year of corn-stuffed silos and wheat fields golden enough to baptize a civilization, but instead it's a year of mildew, tariffs, and terminal stupidity. If there's a god of agriculture, he must have turned in his resignation sometime in late February, citing hostile work conditions and an administration allergic to science, logic, and rain gauges. And who could blame him? The Trump administration, in its infinite wisdom, canceled a $3 billion climate-smart agriculture program because they couldn't stomach the word climate. That's right, while farmers drowned under record rainfall and prayed for dry spells like medieval peasants, the federal government lit its own contingency plans on fire, danced on the ashes, and handmade Italian leather shoes. How's that for irony? The nationalist cheerleaders who howl about American jobs have crafted trade policies so catastrophically dumb that even the corn can't stand it anymore. And let's not forget the sorghum scandal. Sorghum, the humble drought-resistant darling of the American plains, once a booming export to China, now thanks to Trump's kindergarten-level diplomacy and tariff tantrums, exports are down 95%. And yet, in an act of agricultural gallows humor, farmers are planting more, not less. Why? Because corn is too expensive and soy is politically radioactive. This is not strategy, it's a hostage situation. Meanwhile, corn futures have become the manic depressive cousin of Wall Street, surging one day on export rumors, crashing the next on clouds over Iowa. The entire market is jittery, over-caffeinated, and suicidal. It responds not to soil conditions or rainfall data, but to which side of the bed Donald Trump wakes up on or what his horoscope says about assertiveness in trade policy. And still, through the wreckage of policy and precipitation, the administration spins their delusions like cotton candy for the base. America first, they shout. First in infant mortality, first in medical bankruptcy, and first in agricultural self-sabotage. They don't want American farmers to succeed, they want them to submit. The president has discovered something ancient and dangerous, that a man who can starve you can also make you say thank you. What we are witnessing is not just the collapse of a harvest, it's the collapse of the myth of competence. The illusion that somewhere in Washington understands how food gets from soil to shelf. They don't. These people wouldn't know a combine from a Cracker Jack box. They think photosynthesis is a Chinese conspiracy and climate change is a liberal hoax unless it's a hurricane aimed at Mar-a-Lago. Our founding fathers, fire-breathing revolutionaries who plowed fields by day and overthrew kings at night, would spit their wooden teeth across the rotunda if they could see the corporate feudalism we've erected. Thomas Jefferson imagined an agrarian republic of self-sufficient yeomen. We gave him multinational seed patents, debt slavery, and a tariff war that would make Alexander Hamilton drink poison. And now the rains come like prophecy. The rivers swell, the fields rot. And somewhere deep in a Washington boardroom, a man in a red tie chuckles. Let them plant quinoa. But the farmers know better, the workers know better. There's a whisper rising from the rows, a sermon of the seeds, if you will. You cannot sow cruelty and reap peace. You cannot water the earth with lies and expect the truth to bloom. And you cannot threaten the breadbasket of a nation and expect it not to rise. Because one day soon, the combine will come, not for the crop, but for the machine that made famine policy. And it will be driven by the people you thought were too muddy, too quiet, and too tired to fight back. This is no longer agriculture, it is absurdism with a shovel. So now get your boots on, America. The harvest is coming and it won't be grain. Defiance till death.
So what's going on with food stamps about to run out? 42 million Americans who depend on the SNAP or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program to eat to survive. That's going to run out on Saturday? Yep. And let me explain. So right now, if you go to the U.S. Department of Agriculture website, it says, quote, Senate Democrats have now voted 12 times to not fund the food stamp program, also known as SNAP. Bottom line, the well has run dry. We're approaching an inflection point for Senate Democrats. They can continue to hold out for health care for illegal aliens and gender mutilation procedures, or reopen the government so mothers, babies, and the most vulnerable among us can receive critical nutrition assistance. That's quite a stark description of the reason that the government is shut down. Democrats say they're doing it to restore Medicaid benefits and also to continue the extension of the Obamacare subsidy so people can afford health insurance, which expires at the end of the year. But be that as it may, Democrats say, wait a second, there is a contingency fund for food stamps. And in fact, you can go back on the Wayback Machine and find a memo from all the way back just on September 30th of this year, so not really that long ago, that says congressional intent is evident that SNAP's operation should continue since the program has been provided with multi-year contingency funds to ensure that the state can continue operations during a federal government shutdown. Multi-year contingency funds available to fund participant benefits in the event that a lapse occurs in the middle of the fiscal year. So that's a Trump Agricultural Department memo from September 30th, but it's no longer on their website. And I asked USDA, what's up with that? And they said, oh, that's an iterative document. I said, what does that mean? They said it's constantly changing. They no longer think it's true. They think that their current legal analysis, which they acknowledge many disagree with, is that these funds are only for the event of a natural disaster, even if this September 30th document says it's for a government shutdown or can be used for a government shutdown. Democrats say that the Trump administration is changing their interpretation of the law so they can use the hunger of 42 million Americans to pressure Democrats to vote to reopen the government. The Trump administration says, no, that's not true. This is just their legal interpretation, and Democrats should vote to reopen the government because these are vital nutrition programs. In any case, what's going to happen is, unless something changes, 42 million Americans are at risk of going hungry.
What's up, everybody? So guys, in today's video, today is actually 2nd of November 25, and in today's video we are going to talk about some developing stories that are shaking the political and social fabric of America, and that is the growing divide inside the MAGA movement, and probably how farmers who once cheered for Trump are now feeling betrayed. Also, how millions of low-income Americans are struggling as SNAP benefit hang in limbo during the ongoing government shutdown. So the story is basically about loyalty, politics, and survival. So we've seen situations where promises made to the working class and rural Americans are being tested like never before. So we're gonna first of all talk about the MAGA movement and probably a family that has been divided. According to the news outside there, the movement that once moved in perfect synchronization behind Donald Trump is now showing cracks. Not just cracks, but deeper cracks. And what will be the latest issue, if you may ask yourself? That is now the Trump's call to end the Senate filibuster, a move that some MAGA loyalists see it as too risky and even dictatorial. So inside this conservative cycle, the Trump's closet supporters are chasing over strategy. Some say that it's time to burn the old system down, while others are warning that we might destroy what we are trying to save. So this division, this split is not just political, it's cultural, guys. The MAGA brand in itself was built on unity, populism, and anti-establishment fire. But as we head into another election cycles, the question that keeps arising and the question that most people ask themselves, as the MAGA movement become too big, too divided, and too dependent on Trump himself. Another question, if Trump changes courses on policies that once defined him, who will be the best to follow, So those are the emerging issues about the MAGA movement. And now if we look at farmers' reckoning, where the farmers were promised prosperity. In this particular beautiful, the American farms, the heartland, we call it the heartland. So these are the same people who wore red MAGA capes at rallies, proudly calling themselves the forgotten men and women of America. But now, many are feeling like they've been left behind. And a recent report about economy, they are actually calling this situation is a MAGA reckoning in agriculture. So those farmers, generally the farmers who once believed that Trump was all about America first and the policies favored, all the America first slogan, they are now struggling under rising costs, shrinking markets, and broken promises. And some of the biggest frustrations come from decisions. For instance, opening beef imports from Argentina and scaling back farm subsidies. That is one of the worst things that can ever happen to a farmer, because for them, they always wish to have an open market. That's the only thing that they want, not even subsidies. For many farmers, these moves are cut directly against the nationalist economy promises that they voted for. So there was this situation where a farmer was heard saying that they took the hit for the tariffs, thinking that it was short-term pain and for long-term gain. And now, here they are, now left with the pain again. It's a sentiment that is echoing across rural America. They are feeling betrayed. They are feeling that like they are being used as political props and then forgotten. That's how but now, here is the twist. Most of these communities are still identified with the MAGA brand emotionally. It's not longer, it's not just about politics, it's now identity. That's what's making all these things, the things surrounding the reckoning, so complex, because it's not just about. On the other side of the story, if we try to talk about SNAP crisis, this is when politics sits at the dinner table like it eats harder, because that means millions of low-income Americans, they'll no longer be able to afford food, and it's actually going to affect like 42 million children. So because of the ongoing government shutdown, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, aka SNAP, the payments have been delayed. You can imagine. And according to news outside here, food banks across America are seeing record lines as people wait for benefits that have not yet arrived. When it comes to the Treasury Secretary, they announced that emergency SNAP payments could resume soon, but for families living on paycheck to paycheck, even a few days delay is really devastating. On the other side of politics, it's becoming a flashpoint, and the MAGA voices are blaming the government dependency. Others, including moderate conservatives, are saying that, we need to wait, because these are hardworking Americans who need help during a crisis. And of course, we have more ideological divide, which has really deepened, because, if you try to look at things on one side, you have to you have those who on one side you have those who see SNAP as a lifeline. On the other side, you have those who see it as a symbol of failed policy and overspending. But anyway, I mean, it's life when it comes to governments, you know. Let's try to connect the dot here because, you know, it's a country in contradiction. What ties all these stories in short? So, in the same tensions that's been defined in the it's the same tension that's been defining America for years, promises versus reality, and not just America, all over the world. The MAGA movement promised to protect real Americans. That is now the farmers, the factory workers, the forgotten rural voters. But now, those very people are facing economic insecurity, political policy contradictions, and political fatigue. Meanwhile, the SNAP crisis has exposed another contradiction, whereby a country that talks about being the world's richest nation, yet it's still struggling to feed its own citizens during a political standoff. And remember, guys, this is not just about left versus right. I mean, it's not about that. It's about whether America's political system can still deliver for the people for the people that it claims to serve. So, what does all this story means going forward? The MAGA divide, the farmers' frustration, and the SNAP crisis are all signs of a bigger truth, and that is the old political rules are breaking down like never before. Voters are waking up to the gap between political rhetorics and lived experience. Whether you are wearing a MAGA hat, running a small farm, or waiting in line for SNAP benefits, the question remains, who is really fighting for the everyday American? Who, guys? Anyway, guys, I hope you really love watching this video. I appreciate your presence and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.